You're ridiculous. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Common Censored. I'm joined, as always, for Common Censored at least, by Eleanor Goldfield. You know you're a podcast also, so your silent wave, you're miming to the camera.
Wasn't miming.
That is
Oh my God, is a wave a mime?
Yeah. It was
Oh,
silent.
that's terrifying.
All
I'm
right.
going to have to start yodeling while I wave because I'm terrified of mimes.
You know what people love about this show is we get right into it immediately. Like there's no dicking around. No, we're 70% dicking around.
Why is it dicking around?
I mean, vagging around would be kind of weird, you know?
I think it sounds better.
Okay.
Nicer.
All right. Everybody, we're vagging around, but we're going to get started here in just a second. Updates on the ongoing U.S. coup efforts. I have already done a full...
It's Coup 2.0. Coup.0.
No, this is Coup 17.0, I think.
Know, but it just sounds nice.
Yeah, Coup.0. This is the 17th attempt. I did like a 15-minute segment yesterday or the day before going through all of the various coups we've done since 2002 on Venezuela. And yet we have not been able to bring down their socialist government yet. But here is the latest, which is that this is in the New York Times, but this is Antony Blinken, our soulless Secretary of State, has said that the new president of Venezuela is a man who did not receive any votes. No, he actually did. Juan Guaido never received any votes. This man did receive some votes, so I suppose in that way they're getting a little better. But
so did they choose him because Juan Guaido was busy? What happened?
Busy in the witness protection program living in Florida.
Protection program.
The wetness protection program, yeah. The U.S. on Thursday night recognized Venezuela's opposition presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez as the winner of the country's disputed election. Disputed only because the U.S. and the opposition, which is partially funded and a puppet for the U.S., have said it's disputed.
I'm sorry if you already covered this, but like legit, every time Venezuela has an election, there are election observers from around the world, which, by the way, we don't allow at our elections, because it's like totally legit.
We don't like that.
So election observers from like tens of countries, right, come to Venezuela every time there's an election to observe the elections. And every single time they say the same thing. Venezuela has like the most democratic elections, some of the most democratic elections we've ever seen. This is always what you hear from the election observers, at least the ones that aren't from the US, right? So it's quite clear that Venezuela's elections are legitimate and that whether you like it or not, Maduro won. And so the U.S. is just doing what the U.S. do, which is deciding that somebody who has no democratic legitimacy at all won.
But you're forgetting that in America, we press on a screen and that means all is well. You can never check the code, never know, but push on screen.
That's if you get into where that screen is, because it's not guaranteed that you'll get into the little screen.
Yeah. I had said proposed the other day that if it's just imaginary screens and we can't actually prove that the code's the code and they won't show us the code and it's all top secret and all that shit, can't we just do it at home? Can you just push on your laptop at home and go, I voted thing? Like,
I think you should.
All right.
I think it's just about as useful.
The announcement by Secretary of State Antony Blinken comes despite a claim by the country's, and New York Times has to throw in authoritarian president because they can't just say president. Authoritarian president Nicolas Maduro, and by the government-controlled electoral body.
What does that mean?
Well,
isn't every electoral body
government-controlled? Like, it's the 7-Eleven control. Like the guy at the convenience store runs the electoral body.
That reminds me of the force is loyal to
Maduro.
Maduro.
Yeah.
That's what an army is, dumbass.
Yeah, what Eleanor's referring to is the New York Times a few years ago said forces loyal to Maduro, blah, blah, blah. Talking about the Venezuelan army, when was the last time they called the U.S. military forces loyal
Especially if you phrase it, forces loyal Biden, it's like, that doesn't sound good, considering how Biden doesn't know what planet he's on.
He doesn't know what forces are loyal to him or who he is. But so this is Blinken announcing that the new president of Venezuela is the guy who was not elected president of Venezuela. And then the New York Times says, while some leaders have voiced support for Mr. Gonzalez in recent days, guess which ones have? Far right-wing, lunatic, fascist puppets of the United States have voiced support. The U.S. is the largest nation to recognize him as the winner. The U.S. is the largest nation to just jump in and say, hey, with zero evidence. By the way, there is zero evidence that Gonzalez has won. With zero evidence, we're going to announce him president of Venezuela.
Can you just go back to that page real quick? I'm sorry to veer off into no man's land here, but I just...
Oh, God. Tangent time.
I just
Everybody,
can't help...
if you have your tangent alert at home,
we will get right back to the scheduled program after this. I just find it fascinating. You can tell a lot by an outlet, by their editor's picks, or like the other stories they suggest to you. Don't go, I can't read from that far away. So the one that the stories that they suggest that you read after you're done learning so much about foreign policy through this toilet paper of a read is, can I confront the woman who stole my late sister's evening gowns?
These are editors' picks.
These are editors' picks.
At the New York Times.
Another one is, will free beer make travelers more responsible? Which I can already tell you, no. But, so that's the editors' picks,
Can
folks.
you tell New York Times is trying to get you to stop caring about foreign policy of the United States?
Okay.
Next up, is free beer a good thing?
Although also,
is it bad to steal 90s? What was it?
Who's wandering through your dead sister's closet stealing your dresses, dude? This is weird. This is weird behavior. Okay. Anyway, this is what the New York Times wants you to pay attention to. Those graphs from last week that mean nothing. Dead sisters' wedding gowns and free beer, as opposed to the fact that they are propagandizing the shit out of you through this remarkably dumb article.
I recently did a bit of a rant on how the New York Times seems like it's meant for schizophrenic people, because you like it legit is like major foreign policy story. Like, is Israel committing a genocide? You know, they don't call it that, but is Israel the awesomest genocide ever? Like, they'll have a headline about something serious, and then right next to it is like the number one skirt for when you feel like your ankles aren't all that, or like, I'm like, how? What is going on in the minds of these human beings?
Somebody had to okay that article. Somebody had to write that article.
Someone had to write that article or vomit it out of their face holes.
Anyway, back to Venezuela. This is not 2.0, of course. This is an ongoing assault on Venezuela. I am curious how the and you're gonna cover this on your show at some point with Ben Norton, but I am curious, like, how the U.S.'s need for Venezuela's raw materials will play into this, because obviously last time they tried to say that Juan Guaido isn't the president, didn't end well for the U.S. Maduro
We got to steal billions of dollars, though.
Well, yes, but that has never that's been the status quo, regardless of whether we're currently in the midst of a coup attempt or not. So I do wonder how that's going to affect it. Also, there's a lot of options for Venezuela outside of the petrodollar.
Yes, there are. And in the pre-taped interview with Ben Norton that will air next week, he reminded me of something which I had forgotten, that Chavez created a new currency called like the Sucre or something in 2007 to avoid using petrodollars. And then Chavez magically came down with cancer. And this is after Chavez died of cancer in 2012, but in also that same year, I think, or a year before 2006, 2007, the same year he was creating a new currency to go around the petrodollar. He came to New York. I mentioned this the other day. Came to New York to speak at the UN. He also was speaking at a university in New York. I don't know which one, maybe Columbia. And his security tested the chair he was going to sit in and found out it was radioactive. So there's that. All right. Well, here's some more. Wow, Chuck, thanks for the big donation.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks for keeping this show going. One of the opposition, I don't know if she was a candidate, but opposition supporters, Maria Corina Machado, has now announced she's going underground. She wrote a article for the Wall Street Journal saying that Maduro had stolen the election. And now she's announced that she intends to minimize her public appearances and go underground following revelations of details of the violent plans she promoted as part of her refusal to recognize the results of Sunday's presidential election, which resulted in the re-election of Maduro. The announcement by the extremist politician comes after the capture of Freddie Superlano, a politician from the Popular Will Party and former opposition deputy, who was discovered to be one of the main promoters and organizers of the violent riots. I've already covered much about those riots in which schools were burnt down, hospitals were burnt down, because that shows you care about your country when you burn down hospitals.
That's what I couldn't understand. It's like let's say that they're blaming it on, on Maduro or on the left or whatever you want to call it. Why would you win an election and then burn down a hospital?
To show you hate socialism. It's because it's socialized healthcare. So it's wrong socialism. I'm gonna burn down a hospital.
It's so.
But here is what Maduro is saying, and you're not going to get this update from your mainstream media generally, but
you're not going to get anything Maduro says on mainstream media.
Hold on, but what about that free beer article, though? That might help us figure this out. Maduro said he spoke from the palace in Caracas during a press conference with international journalists. The Venezuelan head of state said that Venezuela is at peace after this Monday's extremist violence promoted by the U.S.-backed opposition. He also congratulated the police and military forces for their professional work in achieving stability. And he said, if you ask me my opinion as a citizen, I say that these people have to be behind bars and there has to be justice in Venezuela. And he's referring, the reason he's talking about that is because he's referring to how after they were called the Garimbas, the riots of 2014 and 2017, the opposition assembly ultimately pardoned most of the violent activists. And then this article points out that behind these actions in this coup, there are wealthy and powerful political figures, capitalists, and corporations, such as, Maduro said this, such as Elon Musk, who said he was offering to fight Maduro. And Maduro said, bring it on anytime, any place, like physically fight.
Shut up.
And Maduro said yes. And now Elon Musk seems to be backing away. This actually happened.
This is like not the first time. Elon Musk was like trying to fight Zuckerberg too, wasn't he? And Zuckerberg takes like karate or some shit.
Zuckerberg has like lion blood from virgin lions like syringed into his veins. So yeah, I think he probably would have won. But Elon Musk hasn't done a sit up in 3.5 years. So. But they're both psychopaths, so it would have been interesting.
No, I know. I would have watched that just for this, hoping that both of them would end up
accidentally killing each other.
Yeah.
Maduro then mentions other fascists that are supporting this coup: the Argentinian president Milei, El Salvador's president Bukele, billionaire and president of Ecuador Noboa, and former presidents of Colombia, Uribe and Duque, and the DC-based media outlet Vox.
Oh, Vox.
You decided to throw Vox in there.
Wow, it's been a minute.
It's been a minute since I've heard you're still operating. But yeah, bit of an update. And you cool with talking a bit about the propaganda that Alan McLeod has revealed?
Oh, okay. I was waiting for you to finish that sentence, and I was like, wait, what?
Oh, we love Alan.
We love Alan.
So Alan was tearing apart various headlines and stuff, and one of them is the BBC, which said choreographed celebrations in Venezuela. What is choreographed about?
They were doing line dancing.
About hundreds. It was a lot of electric slide.
It was like a 1,000 people flash dance, like a flash mob doing the line dance.
Yeah, it was nothing choreographed about it. It was like 100,000 people came out to support Maduro in a march, or more than that. It was like a crazy number of people. What's the choreograph? Yeah, it was electric slide. I don't know. Celebrations in Venezuela, as Maduro claims rather than wins, because in the U.S. when someone's announced as a winner, they just win, whereas in Venezuela, we're told he claimed the win. This is all propaganda. The first sentence, they say, as the electoral authorities, which Nicolas Maduro controls. And Alan's like, what do you mean controls? The whole process is, he's saying they're trying to get you to think the whole process is carefully curated. But
like I said,
it's the same as the U.S. It's like
international election observers say every single time Venezuela's elections are remarkably democratic. And there's another thing that I think that is important to bring up. So Venezuela has been under, the boot of U.S. imperialism for a while. Cuba, of course, for decades. What the U.S. doesn't understand, because the U.S. doesn't do this on purpose, is Venezuela and Cuba and other nations like that in the global South spend what little money they have access to in making sure that their people are educated on things like imperialism and colonialism and capitalism, right? It's why Cuba voted very, a remarkable majority that they were in their constitution several years ago, that it was going to be a socialist constitution. It's not because it was mandated. It's because the government asked, is this what you want? And the people said, yes, this is what we want, because they have that education. People who are educated on capitalism, it's kind of like the Bible. Like, if you really read the Bible, you're like, it's like, if you really know what capitalism is and what it does, you're like, no, thank you. I don't want that, because these are the architects of my oppression. And so what the missing bit here is that, this propaganda from New York Times and the BBC, it works a lot on people in the UK and the US because we're so propagandized, and we're also not well educated. And now I'm not saying that to say that we're dumb, because well educated and dumb are two different things. People don't have access to good education, especially in the US. More so, they have it in the UK. But
it's
people,
not true. I learned all about Columbus, who's a superhero. I learned about how Reagan was awesome. Public school.
Yeah. I don't know where in the world the US is on a map, but hey. So a fundamental thing that they're missing is that people are aware. What the US is trying to do is to create this place, this situation where everybody revolts against Maduro because they think he's the cause of all of their suffering. But with a well-educated populace, you can't do that. Same thing with Iran. When I've spoken to Iranians, they say Iranians aren't stupid. We know, we're educated on the history of the US meddling in Iran. We know that it's the US's fault that we have no access to medicine and things like that. So we're not going to overthrow our government. If anything, we are going to support our government in pushing back against US imperialism. So what the US doesn't get is they're only entrenching the hatred and the disdain for the US through this. They're not going to get more friends on board because of this, because people realize it's not Maduro's fault. It's not socialism's fault. It's not whatever. It is the US's fault.
Yeah, I think that's well said. People are far more educated about what it is that Venezuela stands for. And that's why, despite the fact that they're definitely in awful economic times, because the U.S. has had an economic war against them for years and years, they understand there's something they're fighting for. There's something they're standing up for. It's very different than just, we don't know why things are bad and why not bring in the U.S.? By the way, all the opposition candidates, they all want the U.S. to come in and invade them, basically. They want invasion. They want to sell off all their resources to the U.S.
Get, castles out of it, They'll get to live in Miami in some air-conditioned castle that they never have to leave. So,
speaking of resources, let's play this, 10-second clip that you sent me of a congressman talking about the resources in Africa.
I didn't send this to you.
You didn't send this to me? Well, it's amazing.
But thank you.
So you should take credit. I just assume most awesome things are sent from you.
Bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals.
It took him far too long to fix that, by the way.
Fix that Freudian slip.
Like, he legit couldn't think of a non, of something that's not exploiting.
He said,
exploiting, I mean, taking without consent, I mean, raping. No, wait, hold on.
No. What am I looking for? What's the good version of rape? Man, steal, slavery. Oh God. I'm playing this again.
Bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals.
Where
we can get these minerals.
Bless his heart. That's amazing.
Keep exploiting Africa.
I mean,
when the truth gets stuck on your tongue and you can't get it off, he's like,
it's like that Jim Carrey movie, Liar Liar, where like he has to tell the truth for a full day. That's like what that was.
All right, we're going to move on to the topic of censorship of prisoners. And, because we don't just censor those of us who are outside of prisons, we also go after those who are inside prisons. And it's a really interesting topic, and we're going to go to that in 1 second. Please, everyone, click the thumbs up. I mean, how tough is that to do? Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Click the thumbs up. Click the subscribe button. And even those of you who are subscribed on both my channels, rumble.com/LeeCamp and youtube.com/Moment of Clarity, double check that you're subscribed, because YouTube, I don't think Rumble will, but YouTube will just unsubscribe people. I've had people telling me this, that they're like, I subscribe to you, and then I look and it says unsubscribe. So click subscribe, click the bell icon to make sure you're being alerted to the videos. All right, let's keep going.
So this, the writer of this is Jeremy Busby, who's been incarcerated in Texas for over 20 years. And I actually just recently was able to interview him, although of course the interview was cut short because of prison phone calls are not known for being very accessible or long-winded. And so basically, just to give some context here, and this interview will be out next Monday. We're recording this on August 2nd. So if you're listening to this after the fact, starting August 5th or onward, then you can find it at projectcensored.org. So Jeremy Busby is an incarcerated journalist. He started doing journalism in prison, and as a way to get the word out about the conditions in prison. Because if you think about it, like, we know some things, but if you think about like the snippets that you know about what's happening in prison, it's like if you knew what was going on in like a corner of one room of your house. That's like how much we're missing on the prison story. And there was actually something very chilling that Jeremy told me on the phone. He said that once, when he had written an article, the warden of the prison that he was in at the time brought him into the warden's office, and he pointed to the watchtower and the prison walls, and he said, Jeremy, do you know why that's there? And Jeremy said, sure, it's to keep the prisoners in. And the warden said, no. It's to keep the public out. You are exposing what's happening in the prisons, and that could be very bad for you. He basically threatened him.
And he said the walls are so that no one learns what goes on in here.
Yeah. And so they have retaliated in horrific ways against Jeremy. He's been, everything from been sprayed with chemical agents to gotten beat severely. He's gotten transferred all around Texas as much as they can, because this makes it harder for his legal team in particular to meet with him. They've canceled meetings. They've put him in solitary confinement. This story that I'm sharing now, which was just released earlier this month via the Freedom of the Press Foundation, he was put into solitary confinement for 22 months because of this article. And
22 months?
22 months.
Jesus.
That's why he's just sharing it now. And he talks about how when COVID hit the Texas prison system, they basically put the prisons on lockdown. And so that the inmates were confined to their cells 24 hours a day. So they were kind of in solitary while still not technically being in solitary.
And by the way, just a reminder, for most countries in the world, the ones that you'd consider moderately free, there is no such thing as 24 hours a day in a cage. Like, there are prisons, but the
It's
idea
torture.
of keeping someone in a small room for the entirety of the day is torture, and so they don't do it.
So Jeremy talks about how he wasn't able to do his journalism like he had been before because he wasn't allowed to leave his cell. And there was a shortage of staff so he usually tries to talk to staff about, he interviews people. He's a journalist. And I'll just say that, like, the amount of physical and emotional and mental retaliation and pain that he's dealt with just because of his journalism makes it remarkable that he continues to do journalism. And he told me on the phone, he's like, the only way that they'll stop me is to kill me. And they've tried. And he said, like, if I ever die, I'm telling everyone I've never been suicidal. And so don't believe them when they tell you it's suicide, because this is something that prisons do very often as well, is that they will kill someone in a corner of the prison where there are no cameras, right? And then they'll just go hang them in their cell or something and say, oh, they committed suicide.
They'll Epstein them.
Yeah, exactly. So basically he talks about in this article what happened when COVID hit. And he talks about how his cellmate at that time had a contraband cell phone. And that what he started doing is he started using social media. He created pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to inform the general public of the conditions that Texas prisoners were experiencing. And he even went live on Instagram with a hip hop artist, an activist called Trey the Truth, to detail the plights of the prisoners in Texas prisons. And I bring this specific story up because what happened after that, Texas prison officials responded by issuing bleach, masks, fresh fruit, and hot meals to prisoners and adopting an official COVID-19 protocol from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They also wrote me a disciplinary case and tossed me into solitary confinement for 22 months. So this specific story is important because it shows, like, the power of this kind of journalism. Because obviously when this story came out, when he was using the social media that he had access to and, doing Instagram Live with hip hop artists and things like that, he spread the words to such an extent that people in power found it untenable to do anything but issue, let's just call it, like, basic human rights, like giving them food and masks. They found it untenable to do anything else. And so I bring that up because this, to me, is like the pinnacle of journalism as power, to force the powers that be to do what you want, because anything other than that would actually be untenable and they would be propelled off of their thrones. And Jeremy has done that. And he continues to do what he does, even though after this, they threw him into solitary confinement for 22 months, almost 2 years, because of this. And he also, talks about how this is just a continuation of the kind of retaliation that he's faced. And now he does not have access to any of the social media that he used to have access to, of course.
Right.
And it's under the guise of security. Now, I wonder what other journalists we've heard this with, be it the Pentagon papers back in the day or Assange. Oh, well, he put lives at risk. So it's the same, like, they don't even change the playbook. They're saying that it's a security issue, that Jeremy is writing these articles, that he's sharing. Bullshit. It's a security risk that he's sharing the fact that you're beating some people to death in cells next to him. Yeah, it's a security problem for the person who just got beat to death. Like, it is bullshit. It is absolute bullshit. But this is the excuse that they use. And it's the excuse that means that people like Jeremy and other incarcerated journalists, somebody mentioned Mumia Abu-Jamal, don't have even like the smallest amount of what's left of their human rights in jail and ripped away from them.
And Mumia was a journalist, and many believe that's the reason they framed him for the murder, was because he was a up and coming Black journalist on Black radio and writing, etc., and was having a big impact. And so he was someone that they wanted to lock away. They wanted to shut up. Now, of course, he's continued to do a lot of great journalism and writing from prison, but they wanted to have him executed for years and years. So,
He writes, the right to freely express myself and oneself, incarcerated or not, is an inalienable right that should never be infringed upon. Government transparency and accountability hinges on incarcerated journalists' ability to report what's happening inside every prison to the general public. And I mean, like Jeremy said to me when I spoke to him, his goal is to make the conditions in prison better for everybody. And the only way you do that is to expose the fact that the conditions there are atrocious in the first place. So you can find more about his writing is at, well, this one's on Freedom of the Press Foundation, which is freedom.press. But you can also find a lot of his writing at joinjeremy.org, as well as his story. And again, like I said, that my interview with him is going to air on August 5th over at projectcensor.org.
Everyone check that out. And I just want to spend a second here to get down to core reality of our prison system in this country, which is the largest prison system in the world, largest prison state in the world. I know you guys are probably tired of me mentioning that like a broken record, but I did a segment once where I broke down the number of prisoners, like this many are in for this many are in for this, and how we could get rid of 99% of all prisoners locked up in these prisons in a variety of ways. Some of them by not charging them at all, like drug crime should be a health issue rather than a crime issue, stuff like that. But you know, you get it. I was able through just looking at the percentages, you know, and many people are locked up because they haven't even had a trial or a hearing or anything yet, which is supposed to be illegal. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? Oh, we don't do that anymore. Like a third of all prisoners have not actually been found guilty yet. And so anyway, you go through the list of why these, what is it, 2 million, over 2 million people are locked up. And you could get it down to like 5 people in every town in America. Well, there's 20,000 cities in this country. So you have 5 people, which would mean it'd be a little house with like 2 murderers and 3 rapists, and that'd be it.
Which sounds a lot like the Greek houses in a college town.
The frat houses, yeah.
A couple rapists.
Couple murders, couple rapists, yeah. Oh, I forgot. YouTube is censoring all the videos that say the R word. So it's making, you know, YouTube's making it more and more difficult to actually get any knowledge out to people because you can't say the R word anymore. You can't say Nazi anymore. So we just said rapist like 5 times in a row, which is why I then
switched right. Okay.
But anyway, they're making it more and more difficult to actually report on any of this stuff because basically if you say these things, they're not going to
promote
your video to anyone.
Like how would survivors go on a show and talk about
Not allowed to.
Okay.
In fact, YouTube will send a representative to wherever they're doing the broadcast and shoot the survivor. So
it was then no longer a survivor. Okay.
Then no longer a survivor.
All
right. Let's get to this awesome disruption that went down, and I mean,
do you have the video?
I don't have the video unless you send it to me. But. So I've shown on the show many different protests against various organizations due to their support of Israel, support of Israel's genocide. By the way, folks, very exciting. Today is 301 days of genocide. 301. Everybody get your birthday hats out. 301 days of genocide that the world has not been able to stop as Israel continues to commit it against the Palestinian people. But I have shown you many videos of various protests, some people blocking banks, some people protesting against Starbucks or McDonald's or interrupting many of our politicians, our so-called leaders. Who will have driven us into this genocide, have supported it for 300 days. I mean, these people shouldn't just be drummed out of government. They should be locked up for supporting genocide. But here is the latest.
Sent it to you.
Okay. It'll take me a second to pull it up. So if you want to give maybe a little background while I pull it up.
Sure. So Disability Divest is an organization that was founded by disabled folks because they were very upset. Because they were very upset with how the large disability organizations like AAPD and I think the other one's called Disability In. These organizations, like a lot of other big NGOs in other, spaces are funded by the likes of Lockheed Martin and Wells Fargo and Starbucks and things like that. So these folks decided that because of these connections being, I mean, and as I covered earlier in my interview with folks here, you're talking about organizations that are supposedly for and of and by disabled folks that are funded by weapons manufacturers that are currently involved in a genocide where, and this is from the International Committee of the Red Cross, 70 to 80% of the people earlier this year coming into barely functioning and remaining hospitals in Gaza have had limbs amputated or have had spinal cord injuries. UNICEF estimated back in January that 10 children a day in Gaza were losing a limb. And these are just those kind of disabilities. Of course, as Jen said when I spoke with her, she would estimate that almost everybody in Palestine is disabled because disabilities are not just physical, they're mental.
Yeah.
So I think that like this is why Disability Divest was created and why they felt the need to disrupt. There was an AAPD event celebrating the 35th anniversary of the AD, the American Disabilities Act.
They had this big event, like, glamorous like. And they sent me one video, which that's not the one we're going to show because it doesn't actually show anything, but it's pretty funny because they're in the middle of their like live stream for this event. And then you hear some people start chanting, and then it goes to black for like 20 minutes. Like it's a long time.
Yeah.
They didn't want people to see it online. All right. Shall I show it?
Yeah.
Okay. So here is the interruption of that event.
Wells Fargo equals native genocide! Wells Fargo equals native genocide!
We at the AAPD welcome all opinions and views on many topical matters, but we kindly ask that you please allow the program to resume, and we can discuss this post-event.
No disabled pride of genocide! No disabled pride of genocide!
So much.
We, the members of Disability Divest, call on AAPD to live up to the legacy and power of disability by fighting hard to call for a free Palestine and an end to the U.S. disability establishment's partnerships with war profiteers and complicity with genocide and colonialism. We come together as comrades and reject the elitist and ageless idea that critiques.
Yeah, there were people clapping.
So there were actually people that supported them in this, and no one was arrested, thankfully. So yeah, this is the. I love that automated voice. The AAPD recognizes and appreciates all voices, but shut the up and sit down. I love that so much.
For those listening to the podcast, which, by the way, this is a podcast called Common Censored. Check it out when you're bored and you're in your car. But for those listening to the podcast, they take the stage, and obviously they're chanting and et cetera. But several of them are in mobility scooters or what they're called. But so you can tell these are disabled folks that they don't have a problem with the organization except for where it's getting its funding. Like
Right.
The idea of standing up for disabled folks, absolutely. The idea of getting your funding from Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and banks and Starbucks is really problematic.
Well, right, and that's kind of the point is that like, and I remember there was a similar shutdown with like no justice, no pride, I think is what it was called. Yeah. Gosh, it's been so many years, where there was a blockade of the Pride Parade in DC because Pride in DC was also funding genocides and war crimes and things like that. And they would like, they noted that like Lockheed Martin was a great place for queer folks to work. And it's like, why? So it's like this pink washing or rainbow washing or whatever way you want to call it, whitewashing of these organizations that claim that they exist to support members of their community, whether that be queer folks, whether that be indigenous, disabled, what have you. And it's like, in reality, they are just sucking at the teat of the war machine, and they needed to be called on it. And that's, I mean, this is exactly what that is. And Disability Divest, if you want to check it out, it's disabilitydivest.org, and they have a list of their demands. And they don't just mention Gaza. They mention all like several different colonial and imperialist, I hesitate to say war zones because that suggests like, you know, two equal sides, but many areas that are rife with war crimes, thanks to imperialism and colonialism. So, and when I spoke with them, Jen basically said that it's important to recognize that under imperialism and under colonialism.
This is Jen Deer and Water.
Yes, sorry. Under imperialism and under colonialism, the systems can disable you if they want to. And I think that that's also really important because, like, she mentioned that the disability community is like, unlike indigenous or queer or what have you, it's a community that anybody at any point in their lives might find themselves a part of. And so an understanding that capitalism disables people, colonialism disables people. Of course, it kills them too, but I'm just talking about people who survive. So the disabilities that people live with today are thanks to these systems. You know, just the fact that like there have been studies that show like the like how much poverty affects disability. It's remarkable because the stresses on your body make any kind of like underlying autoimmune disorder or any kind of disability that you might have been born with or might have developed later that much more difficult because you don't have access to things to alleviate it. So these systems either create or worsen disabilities. And so any kind of conversation about disability justice or disability rights has to mention capitalism and colonialism and imperialism and the war machine in general. So I just thought that was a really good highlighting of the intersection of issues, and also the fact that, look, if they dehumanize disabled folks, what do you think? Like, do you think they actually care about you? They dehumanize non-white folks, you know, black folks, indigenous, whatever. They dehumanize disabled folks. What makes you think that you'd be special and that they'd see you as human enough to not disable you or not to kill you or not to oppress you in other ways that they're already oppressing you? So I think that this was also an interesting point to bring up to help see the larger picture as well of the injustices that we all exist on some kind of oppression spectrum. So that was a powerful conversation as well.
Yeah, and I agree that the intersectionality of all this is really important, and they did a good job of highlighting that. And I love to see these sad, pathetic people be like, we value all opinions.
Dude, what?
Could certain opinions shut up right now while we pat ourselves on the back?
Well, we
Thank
get
you.
more money from Lockheed Martin.
Thank you for shutting the F up while we collect money at our gala.
Dude.
Okay, we're going to move on to the 100th birthday of James Baldwin. But I want to say this now in case some of you want to sign up. I'm going to do an extra segment at the end of the hour for all of you at Locals. I'm going to try something new where I go through the New York Times a little bit, the front page, without knowing what I'll encounter. I'm not I'm just going to see what the New York Times has up there for our perusing fun. And anyway, I'll go through that with you guys at Locals. That's at around the top of the hour. If you want to join up and become a member and support this show, go to leecamp.net. That's leecamp.net. And then scroll down to become a subscriber. And it'll be a whopping 38 cents an episode. 38 cents. And you'll be able to help this show continue. So check that out. Okay. But for the moment, let's celebrate James Baldwin. You didn't send me a link to this, so I just pulled up NPR's article on him. But
I mean, yeah. So it is, it would have been James Baldwin's 100th birthday. James Baldwin, if you haven't read James Baldwin, stop whatever you're doing. Except, no, don't watch till the end of this.
Yeah, do not
once
stop.
You're done,
absolutely do not stop what you're doing.
Once you're done with this, go find some James Baldwin to read. He was very prolific, so there's no shortage of James Baldwin to read. And I have to say, like, he's been one of the most pivotal writers that I've ever read, and an incredible mind. And I feel like he was gone far too soon, like so many other incredible minds. And I wanted to share some of my favorite quotes. One of the ones that I love is "The history is not past," which is very relevant.
Which he wrote in the future.
The other one that I remember reading not long after, I think it was like in November or December of last year, and it was shared on a Zoom where a lot of fellow anti-Zionist Jews were talking about like what our mandate is in this time. And this quote from James Baldwin was shared. "I imagine one of the reasons that people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." Huh. I mean,
well said. Well, and one of the things he was known for, which you just made clear, is these kind of perfect sentences that it's like, 10 words and you can think about it for half an hour or something.
Oh, like days. That sat with me. I marinated in that one for a while. But I mean, that's the thing. I can read James Baldwin books at a snail, and I'm a very fast reader, but I read James Baldwin at a very slow rate because every sentence I'm like, oh, I need to step back for a second and just take that in. I can't process it. I can't process it like I can the other books. Another one that is, of course, very apt. I'm sure folks can relate to this. Anyone who has ever struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to be poor.
It is, but yeah, I that's the thing, is like a lot of things. It's like, oh, I've discussed that, but I didn't phrase it that well. Instead I rambled for 15 minutes about how insane it is that, like, if you're poor, then all of these things, a lot of the ways we function in society are incredibly difficult. I mean, things like getting to a bus station or something, like, or taking a train, or trying to find food that's not $1 million at the bus station, or like, it's just all these things become far more expensive. They're expensive both via time and money. And, and I think about this a lot. I think, being not like poor, but when you're in middle class and you notice all these fees for things like, they try and charge you because you didn't charge you exorbitantly because you didn't fill up the rental car tank or something. And you're like, okay, I have the extra $20 that you're charging me for some stupid reason. But most people don't. No. Like, I am constantly thinking about that. It's like, okay, I guess I can pay this dumb fee, but for other people, this is like 7 hours of their life you just sucked away.
Well, not only that, but when you're rich, you get handouts. I remember once when I worked at studios in LA, recording studios, and I remember there was just always a string of people. And there were pretty big names that were at these studios. There was a constant stream of people dropping off free guitars, free amps, free microphones that cost like tens of thousands of dollars.
For the rich.
I mean, yeah, like for people,
for the rich,
who could buy 100 of those and just hang them up on their wall. And meanwhile, I was like literally living in my car. And I was like, I can't afford guitar strings. And this dude just got a $10,000 guitar and he could buy all of them.
And Slash just got a gift guitar.
Okay, cool. So that's also, a big issue. And those are just like physical handouts. But of course, like tax cuts for the rich. It's like the tax bracket that you're in, if that you can barely pay rent, is a shittier tax bracket than Elon Musk. It's like, okay. That's cool.
But furthermore, the rich have a variety of ways to get around most of their taxes. So even though the tax percentage may be whatever, 20 whatever percent, they just have a lot of ways, a lot of loopholes to get out of paying actual taxes.
Mm-hmm. Another one that I really, really love is also one that speaks to the diaspora, whatever that might be for folks. Perhaps home is not a place, but simply an irrevocable condition. I love that. The paradox of education is precisely this, that as one begins to become conscious, one begins to examine the society in which he is being educated. Which also is
I
why
know.
they don't teach you shit in school
It-
here.
I often think it's like, man, if I had just not read. And the reading that was pivotal for me came after college. It was,
Of course.
it was when I took it upon myself to
You're not going to get assigned this shit.
to learn about how our society worked and how our world worked and how our government worked. And I was like, man, if I just hadn't done that right now, I could be happily telling dog fart jokes on a stage somewhere. Be so beautiful.
Sorry you missed out on the dog fart jokes.
Thank you, Cool Guy 99, for donating over on Rumble. Appreciate it.
But yeah, of course, if you like, I was never assigned James Baldwin in school, and I went to a good school. I never, and this is something I remember I was reading, Revolutionary Suicide, which is the autobiography, by, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on his name.
Dr. Seuss.
Huey
P. Newton.
Huey P. Newton. Thank you.
Not Dr. Seuss?
No.
No.
I want to say Fred Hampton, but that okay. Anyway, Huey P. Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, he learned to read not in school. He learned to read because he went to the library in Oakland and taught himself to read by reading Plato, which I don't actually. That's
no, how that
it's like
work. Unless
starting
it was
with the most difficult.
Was it pop-up Play-Doh? Because you maybe could.
But so the people that have become these thought leaders that we look to and that we have looked to oftentimes didn't get any education officially, because an official education typically just forces people and twists them and pummels them into being good proles. So that Baldwin quote is very apt.
And Anarchist had a good point. You can still be radical without reading the seminal figures.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There are different ways to find your radical beliefs.
Well, and I think really, I think that's a good point too, because I think a lot of what radicalizes people is just these lived experiences. I think what, for me, and I know some friends of mine too, what's helped is that writers, and I'm not just talking about big writers like James Baldwin, even just, pamphlets or zines or things can help us, and helped me is take my lived experience of seeing oppression and experiencing oppression and understanding where that comes from and why it is and how it is and the history of it that brought us to this moment. So I think that that's important, that political education, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what radicalizes you. And I think that most people are radicalized before they start reading these, because they wouldn't go looking for that if they hadn't already started feeling radicalized. And this,
by the way, real quick, thank you, Wookie Goldberg, for the donation on Rumble.
And this, I'll just share this last one because I love it. James Baldwin has written a lot about the role of artists and poets, and a lot of those quotes are so special to me. This one I think is really poignant. The role of the artist is exactly the same as the role of the lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see.
Another way to say that is there's a lot of love in art. Because in order to make people conscious, you need to, in some way, love at least what they could be. At least what they could become.
But yeah, though that's just a very small, a very
Sampling.
small sampling. And again, any of his books, any of his essays are brilliant and powerful. And I definitely recommend it. And I wish that he were still with us today. I would love to know what he would have to say about this shit show that we're currently
That's the
living
thing
in.
is, we really should just celebrate the fact that all these people didn't have to be here to see this.
I know.
I mean, as much as you may want to hear their take, I just want to be like, you're welcome, George Carlin, that we didn't show this to you. You're welcome, MLK. Just down the list that you didn't have to see the shit we become. So we're going to wrap up the Common Censored Hour right now, but I'm going to do a special segment. We'll call it analyzing, but I'd say more shitting on the New York Times.
It is a form of analysis.
I'm going to say, going over the New York Times over at Locals, which my Locals page, my Locals community, which is leecamp.net. If you just type in leecamp.net, it'll forward you to that page, and you scroll down and click become a subscriber. So everybody at Locals, hang in there. Don't hang up. If you can hang up the laptop, and I will see you in a minute. But for Common Censored, thank you guys. You're the best. And I'm going to leave it to Eleanor Goldfield to close it out.
Oh, you asshole.
Because you never say goodbye.
I don't know how. You have keep fighting. I have.
Ratso Harris just said ta-ta. How about that?
No, they said ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta.
Oh my God.
Which seems a little intense.
We just found your new closer. All right. Thank you, everybody.
I'm not British. I don't think I can say that.
Keep fighting. And I will see Locals in just 1 second. We're gonna go to black screen for 12 seconds here. All right. See you in a minute.